player. He's here with us every week and now live with us here on Tuesday morning. Wilson, it's great to see you. Healthy. Hair is back.
Yes.
Smile is back. You look fresh. Good to see you.
Great color.
Hey, yes, feeling much better. It turns out last week I had the flu, and I was in bed for 4 days with a fever.
Whew.
So it started that morning, that Tuesday morning when I woke up, and then went basically until the weekend. So feeling better now and happy to be with you guys, actually healthy again.
Incredible effort last week. We will not forget it here.
So
on the
ate the
Culotta
pizza.
Show. That's right. That's right. Don't
Flu
eat the
game,
pizza.
Wilson.
The flu game. Michael Jordan. All right, Wilson. Brian Kelly continues to shake the staff up over at LSU Ops. It seems like he has now kind of found his rhythm. Is this the crew he's moving forward with?
Certainly to an extent. We all were just talking about off the field coaches and analysts and things like that, and LSU has got a few openings for analyst spots now. John McDonald and Terry Malone, according to Football Scoop, are not going to be part of the staff next year. That they were let go, or the LSU sort of parted ways with them. And, they'd been two staffers and two very long-time coaches. Terry Malone, a guy who was working with the tight ends, and McDonald with the offensive line. And so now there's some openings there for some analyst positions. And that's sort of your typical offseason churn. Nothing like too surprising that analysts are leaving and coming and going. And then, the bigger name there, though, is John Jancic, not being part of the team next year, no longer on staff. He was somebody who was retained amid all the coaching change, but didn't have a clear role going forward. And if it looked like he would probably need to go back to being an analyst, especially when the dust settled with the coaching staff. And so, we'll see what he ends up doing in the rest of his career and his future. But, LSU kind of going in a different direction there. And, Bob Diaco still got to figure out if he's going to be on staff next year or if he slides back into an analyst role as well. So it's sort of a lot within that support staff is, I think, going to continue to kind of shift and change over the course of the offseason, which is sort of typical. A lot of that goes on behind the scenes, doesn't make a ton of headlines because it's not one of your 10 on-field coaches. But it is still, as y'all just said, people who are critical within the building and, do a lot there in the season to help the on-field coaches and make that whole operation run. And so that stuff is all kind of in flux. But at least when it comes to the 10 on-field position coaches, obviously that was all set a couple of weeks ago. But this support staff part of things is going to continue to maybe they'll continue to bring in some guys, and maybe some others will leave for different jobs and things like that over the next few months.
Wilson, what do you make of the groundswell right now that's happening between the NCAA and it seems like they're catching it from every direction?
Well, it's been going on for sort of just growing and building for a few years now, and it's just continuing to do so. And it seems like every day there's something new that puts sort of a chink in the NCAA's armor, and it's just going to be hard. It's wild where we've come in college football in 5 years, and I just sort of sit here thinking, like, man, what's it going to look like in another 5 years from now? Is there going to be direct, revenue sharing? Is there going to be some kind of super division, or is football going to be operating by itself? We don't know the answers to all those questions, of course, but it just feels like those are more and more in the direction that we're headed in. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten sort of forming this kind of collaboration of sorts, and nothing's too firm to come out of that yet. But it just feels like things are headed in a direction that maybe isn't going to include the NCAA, which is, it was interesting listening to Kevin Steele on the Paul Feinbaum show within the last couple of days. Maybe that was last week. I can't exactly remember when that was. Saying he was like, as a coach, I don't even know what the NCAA does anymore, and that's a problem. If you're the NCAA, if your own employee, coaches don't even know what it is that you're doing exactly, and so they've lost a lot of their teeth. They're still trying to enforce here and there, but not really being taken seriously in a lot of ways, especially with these. What's been brought forth by the attorneys general in Tennessee and Virginia. And there's just so much up against the NCAA right now because for so many years they kicked the can down the road and didn't do the job that they needed to be doing at the time. And now they're suffering for it.
9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Wilson. Terry Bussey will make his official announcement on what school he is going to. It really does seem like LSU has put their best foot forward here as late and has got themselves into a mix. How real is the chance from maybe what you've heard or how you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it feels definitely like a definite real possibility. Terry has hasn't come out and obviously said where he's going or really given any indication of which way he's leaning, but he's been to LSU a few times here. Obviously, made those string of visits recently, and LSU is firmly in the mix here. For him to not sign back in December, even though he was a Texas A&M commitment, obviously opened the door. And as everyone knows, LSU has got him, on campus, has built some strong relationships there with guys like Frank Wilson and Sherman Wilson and other folks on some of these new defensive coaches on staff, Corey Raymond, talking like stuff like that with what he might be as a defensive back. And so there's a very real possibility here that LSU ends up flipping him on tomorrow morning, and we'll see. Over the next 24 hours, obviously those things can shift and change and go all over the place, and so we'll see kind of how this winds up with Terry Bussey. But LSU is going to be right in it at the end there tomorrow morning. And we'll see if he ends up putting on a LSU hat or sticking with Texas A&M. But it would be a huge get for LSU, obviously, if they can continue land another 5-star plus kind of guy in this class, because you already got one with Dominic McKinley, and now possibly here with Terry Bussey, 2 guys on the defensive side of the ball, even though Terry's an athlete but kind of projects as a defensive back. This is something that LSU is pretty critical to get. It would be a big, nice feather in the entire staff's cap, but a good sort of signal there from Corey Raymond right out of the gate of what he's able to recruit there. If they're able to land him here down the stretch, obviously, like we said, big team effort because LSU's been recruiting him now for a while. But it would be absolutely massive if they can get him tomorrow morning with what he's capable of and what we would show about this class. There was some sort of wonders about this class at the end of sort of there in the early signing period because they didn't have a 5-star. Well, now if you get Dominic McKinley and Terry Bussey tomorrow, you get 2 to close down the stretch. That's a really strong finish for this class if they can do it.
Then I look on social media and I see Gabe Relaford's running 20 miles an hour. I mean, you talk about a scary proposition of Relaford. He may have turned into the state's 1, 2, 3 player in the state his senior season up there with Trey'Dez Green and McKinley and the crew. So look out for Relaford as well. Wilson, CJ Daniels is going to be on the show tomorrow, and really looking forward to the conversation and talking to Daniels. What have you learned about Daniels, and how can he help?
Well, I'm going to be interested to hear that myself. A couple things just researching about him. One thing that's sort of interesting about him off the field, he describes himself as an epilepsy advocate. His mom has dealt with epilepsy, for I think her entire life, and he's something that he's had to witness and deal with in his own life, and sort of teach him how to grow up and learn from that. And that's a lot to put on a young person, but it's something that sort of shaped some of what who he is. And, fascinated to talk with him, hopefully, about that in the future. That's, just sort of one sort of aspect of who he is in his whole life. But also as a just pure football player, he's a guy who's, going to go after be able to go up and get the ball. High points the ball really well, downfield target. I think last year he was maybe 15.5 average depth of target, which was actually higher than even Neighbors or Brian Thomas. And somebody who was just stretching the field a lot for Liberty, and obviously not getting the same kind of competition that he's going to be getting at LSU and in the SEC. At Liberty's schedule last year was not very much to write home about, but he was still out there doing it. 55 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Right, so he is somebody who I think could really pair well with Garrett Nussmeier's game in particular. When you look at Garrett, we know Garrett wants to stretch the ball vertically and throw it deep. And when you've got a guy who's about 6'2", like CJ Daniels, but can really go up and get it, I think that can be advantageous for this LSU offense next year and create a nice pairing. We'll see how they start to kind of mesh and form together and come together and all those things. But with what CJ has done in his career and with Garrett's tendencies, it feels like that could be beneficial for this LSU offense next season.
Wilson, I don't know if you're seeing this, but Marvin Harrison's being pushed by Malik Neighbors real intensely on this, and they're starting to see some scouts that said at the Senior Bowl that that they have heard that there are teams that have Neighbors actually graded ahead of Harrison. And look, I compared this in the first hour. The Patrick Peterson, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones year, those guys went 4, 5, and 6. I think the Falcons, Bengals, and Cardinals would all said they won the draft and they would have shuffled them up and taken any 3 of them. That seems to be what Harrison and Neighbors are going into this draft. What do you expect here to happen to Neighbors in this draft buildup?
certainly be a top 10 pick. And it's interesting, it's kind of all in the eye of the beholder, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, I saw what you're seeing. Like, certain scouts have Neighbors above Marvin Harrison, and other scouts are going to have Marvin Harrison above Neighbors. And it's kind of reflective of, almost the Biletnikoff discussion in some ways, and what they were like over the last 2 seasons as well. It was like, Neighbors had statistically the better year last year, but Marvin Harrison is obviously an excellent and supremely talented player as well. And so it's just sort of like which team is going to be drafting and which, is going to have, which one higher on their board kind of thing. And it all depends in terms of who goes first, who goes second. But either way, whatever team gets either one of them is getting a fantastic player. And probably 2 guys are going to be in this league for a long time and be successful in this league for a long time. I mean, Malik is, everyone sees it as like, oh, he's pushing Marvin Harrison, and all these comparisons kind of happen, and that's natural. That makes sense. But it's also like, these are 2 just great football players, and they can be great football players without diminishing one of the other ones. They're both excellent guys, and Malik is, I think, really going to stand out in this draft process in terms of his athleticism, his vertical jump, his speed, his ability. I don't know how well anybody's going to be able to pick up on this aspect of things, maybe in some of the agility drills, but just the way he runs after the catch and his ability to separate from defenders who are trying to tackle him. He's so slippery. We saw that in particular last year. His yards after the catch was just absurd, and he was so good in that regard, turning intermediate catches into long gains and that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's going to come through necessarily in the pre-draft process, but you can see it all over his tape. And he's going to end up being a top 10 pick for sure, if he's not something horribly wrong has happened between now and the draft. Because he could even, like we're saying, maybe he gets right up. Does he leapfrog Harrison in the draft order? We'll see. But he'll be, right there with him, there in the top 10, and and Brian Thomas and some of his other receivers not too far behind. But it's clear that Malik and Marvin Harrison are probably your 1-2 off the board.
Wilson, last one. Since the last time we talked, LSU picked up another offensive lineman. Devon Harper committed to the class, and he's another huge big-time prospect. He's out of Calvary Baptist up in North Louisiana. Another one for Brad Davis. What more can we say about Brad Davis?
Gosh, I don't know what more we can say at this point, because he's just done a fantastic job here over the last few years, turning this offensive line into an absolute strength of the team. And we're going to, I think, see that next fall, that LSU is going to really lean heavily on its offensive line offensively, because that is going to be a strength of that group. But in turn, he brought in 6 offensive linemen in this class. He's brought in he's just rebuilt that unit into something that has got, top line starters, that veteran guys who have played a bit of football, and the depth now building up behind them, and adding someone like Devon Harper continues to do that. It also continues to add to this 2025 class that's so strong. And it also is somebody else who is an offensive lineman in Louisiana, coming on the heels kind of Will Campbell and Emory Jones, somebody else who's pretty, very highly ranked. That's not something we've seen in Louisiana a ton, but it's capital LSU, and with Brad Davis there, is able to capitalize on that because he's such a good recruiter. And, so in terms of what more can we say about him, I don't even know, because he's getting a lot of credit, as he should be at this point. And as long as he continues to recruit at the level that he is and develop players at the level that he is, he'll be an asset on this LSU staff that they are going to enjoy having.
Have a great day.